Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Graham Richmond, and today I get to do something that I truly enjoy, and that is to sit down with a couple of current MBA students and hear about their personal journey and experience in business school. Some of our regular listeners may be familiar with a content series we run at clearadmit.com called Real Humans of MBA Programs, where we get current students to answer questions about their MBA journey. And well, you can sort of think of this episode as a podcast version of Real Humans, focused on a very special program offered at the University of Pennsylvania, the Lauder Institute's Joint International Studies degree with Wharton. The school describes this joint degree as a, quote, pioneering program for aspiring global business leaders. Lauder students earn 2 degrees in 2 years, a Wharton School MBA, plus an International Studies MA from the University of Pennsylvania. So this is a really special degree program, and without further ado, I want to introduce our guests. I have 2 students who are currently at Wharton doing the Lauder program as well. And first up, we have Wendy Yu. Wendy is a graduate of the University of Toronto, where she studied management and econ and psych, graduating the top 5% of her class. She then spent 3 years with Kearney, doing consulting and rapidly progressing to the associate role before leaving to join Wharton Lauder. Her MBA internship, which she did last summer, was with Amazon in operations. And Wendy's fluent in English, Mandarin, Shanghaiese, if I'm pronouncing that right. And she also knows some beginner French. She's a certified hot yoga instructor, a skier, and a dog lover. And she's also pretty good at video games, it sounds like. So welcome, Wendy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. So we're going to get into a lot of questions, but first let me introduce our second guest who's also joined us. Her name is Juliana Escobar, and she's a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, where she studied international relations and affairs and graduated with a near perfect GPA. She then spent a couple of years at Deloitte as an analyst and then a consultant before moving on to work for the Clinton Foundation, and then also then went on to work at LinkedIn for a couple of years before heading off to Wharton Lauder. Your internship, Juliana, was with Google last summer, and you are fluent in English, Spanish, French, and also, it sounds like, speak some Portuguese and Italian. I also learned from your resume that you're passionate about indie music festivals, salsa dancing, and vinyasa yoga. So welcome, Juliana.
Thanks so much, Graham. It's great to be here.
So again, really appreciate both of you making time. What I wanted to do is just ask you a whole bunch of questions about, how you ended up at Wharton and Lauder specifically, and also, just to hear more about like what this program's like and all the ins and outs of it. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with Wendy. And I just, I know that I shared some of the basic facts and sort of timeline in terms of your studies and work, but I'd love to hear a bit more about your background and that path that kind of led you to Wharton Lauder. So Wendy, why don't you give us an answer on that one, and then we'll hear from you afterwards, Juliana.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm originally from Toronto in Canada, and I did most of my schooling there, but actually I spent 3 years of my high school in Shanghai, China, where I went to international school. So a completely different country, culture. Even though I'm Chinese by ethnicity, my Mandarin at the time was not good at all. So it was also a very big opportunity for me to just pick up my native language. Yeah. And having graduated from University of Toronto, where I studied business, I knew for my MBA that I wanted to do a dual degree. I definitely wanted to complement the business aspect, and that's when I learned about Lauder. I think I did some research on dual degrees, but Lauder seemed like the one program where it was truly integrated into the core MBA curriculum. So kind of like you mentioned, it's 2 degrees in 2 years, and a lot of my colleagues at Kearney also joined Lauder. We had a lot of alumni in Lauder as well. So I think speaking to different individuals, I learned that this would be the right path for me, in that one, it not only complements my MBA degree with an international studies focus, but 2, also it is just another community within Wharton. So kind of 80 students within 950 students population, and I thought that that would just be something that would really allow me to thrive in.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Wendy, before we get Juliana to tell us about her background is, I know with the Lauder program, you have to pick a language, right? That's maybe a focus area. So I just wondered if I didn't mention what your language was that you had chosen. So do you want to just shed some light on that?
Yes, so I'm in the Africa general track, and that means that I tested out of a language. So it can be any language. And for me, I tested out of Mandarin. And so instead of taking language like Huli would in her track, I instead take humanities or history courses that's related to the Africa region of study.
Okay.
And specifically why I picked the Africa general track was because I thought this would be a really good opportunity in the 2 years to learn something new about a country or a continent that I haven't previously been to. And secondly, I'm also interested in international expansion in the future. So specifically looking at expanding into developing markets. And I thought that Africa would really complement my experience in North America and Asia.
Got it. Okay. So, Juliana, you've been patient. I want to hear a little bit about your, again, just your background and what led you to Wharton Lauder. And obviously, if you could, like Wendy, just shed some light on the language track that you've chosen or the track you've chosen within the program.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Colombia. I was born and raised in Bogota, the capital city, and moved to the United States after high school to start university. And I majored in international relations, as you mentioned at the beginning, and started out my professional career with Deloitte Consulting, where I was there for about almost 3 years. And I got the opportunity to work with companies across diverse industries, but I really felt like something was missing, and I wanted to get back to the roots of more of what I had majored in undergrad. And so that's when I transitioned over to the Clinton Foundation, where I was doing impact investing. So what that means is, instead of traditional philanthropy, where a project might be wholly reliant on donor funding, we were setting up social businesses that were working directly with smallholder farmers. So the idea was to enable them to be able to have fair wages and sell to a secure market. I did that for also about a couple of years, and then a recruiter from LinkedIn reached out to me actually through LinkedIn and offered me a job that would allow me to mix technology with social impact. So I was working with nonprofit organizations in my role in sales at LinkedIn. But I always knew, even when I was in undergrad, that at some point I would want to go back to school. And I thought, well, I majored in liberal arts. I have a liberal arts degree, so I think a business degree, an MBA, it's such a versatile degree that I think it makes the most sense. And when I started to do my research, I ran across the Wharton Lauder program, and I thought, this is great for me because it allows me to both combine my passion for international studies, to be among people that are curious about the world around them, speak multiple languages such as myself, and the fact that it's so well integrated with the MBA, you still graduate within the same 2 years. I thought that was ideal for me. And here at Lauder, I am specializing in Portuguese, in what we call the Latin America track. So basically, I take a class where I study the history, politics, economics of Brazil, and couple that with instruction in Portuguese language. And the reason I did that was, just in case one day I decide to go back to Colombia, to Latin America, I'd be able to do business not only with the Spanish-speaking countries, but also by adding Portuguese, I can also work and transact with Brazil.
Makes sense. So I want to stay with you, Juliana, and just ask, if you were in an elevator with me and had to describe, the Lauder program to an MBA applicant. So someone who already knows, like, they want to get an MBA, but they've never heard of Lauder, and like, how would you do it if you had to just, in a nutshell, kind of give me the quick description?
Absolutely. I'd say it's the ideal complement to a business education. The Lauder program is great for anyone who is curious about international issues and engaging with business professionals from around the world. And it gives you the opportunity to take courses in the social sciences and humanities. And at the same time, it employs a field-based approach to learning by offering students the opportunity to travel to a different country and learning about diverse topics firsthand. So for example, this past semester, students got the opportunity to go to Alaska and Iceland and study different subjects. Even, with the challenges of COVID, I think it's pretty remarkable that the program was able to still offer students some travel opportunities to complement their education.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Wendy, is there anything that you would add, like if you were forced to kind of give me a really quick description of the program?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Huli talked about from like the academic perspective, I wanted to point out from the community perspective is that I really think this is a program for someone who, if you felt like your whole life, like myself and many other students, where you never really fit in one specific environment or country, you kind of felt like you've been straddled between multiple cultures, multiple languages, then Lauder is home for you.
That's a great point. Yeah, I guess it's sort of a great place for global citizens or whatever we could call those individuals. Wendy, I want to stick with you and ask you what you're hoping to do after business school, both like immediately, when you graduate, because I guess graduation is now, you're going to graduate in the spring. So what you're hoping to do right after business school, and even in the longer term, what your plans are.
Immediately after business school, I'm actually going to be going back into consulting. I think there are still a lot of aspects of consulting that I can learn from, and specifically, I'm hoping to do some international projects abroad. Mm-hmm. And then when I think more about the long term, I would love to do international expansion for a consumer goods company. I don't know exactly where that would be, but that is something that I'm passionate about.
Okay, makes sense. And Juliana, how about you? What are you hoping to do when you graduate? If you already know, feel free to share, and then what you're going to do in the longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. So this past summer, I interned at Google, and I will be going back to Google upon graduation. I'm excited to continue growing my career in the technology sector. And as I think about my plans long term, I also hope to be able to work abroad at some point. Not sure about the location yet, maybe Europe, maybe go back to Latin America, just so that I can use, the other languages that I know, and as well as take advantage of the international education that I am now getting to be able to learn about the way that business is transacted across different countries in the world.
Okay. Yeah. And that's actually a perfect segue into the next thing I was kind of curious about, which is, and we'll just stay with you, Juliana. I want to know, like, how has Lauder helped along this path to your goals? I mean, even in terms of getting this job with Google, but, in the longer term too, it sounds like, you have this interest in using language, but when you think about Lauder and what it's given you above and beyond just the MBA, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the main thing, and we've alluded to this a little bit, is community. Mm-hmm. People tell you this, they joke about the Lauder love phrase, which essentially means before you join, it's just, it's such a tight-knit community where everyone is willing to help each other out. And then once you join, you really understand what it means, and you hope to pay it forward, but also making sure that you're engaging with other people that are interested in the program. But when I was going through my search of internships, I talked to our career advisor, Kim, who is phenomenal, and she instantly connected me with a host of alumni that work at Google, not only in the US, but even some that had done some work abroad. And I reached out to them, and I got 100% response rate, which again just speaks volumes about how strong the community truly is. And then secondly, I will say, I think having this in my resume when employers are looking at resumes from students that go to Wharton, if they see this additional degree that you've taken kind of like the time and effort to go through another degree in the same 2 years, so that means you're doing more work than your traditional Wharton student. I think that's also a good differentiator when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah, those are good points. I was thinking back to my time at Wharton, and I know that even I had a sense of that sort of Lauder community. I had a couple of people on my learning team who were in the Lauder program, and I was just doing the MBA, but I always got the sense that they were part of this like special, kind of really close knit club,
Yeah.
and that it was just really interesting because they traveled together and done all these other things, and they were doing whatever language courses and geopolitics courses and things together. So. And then I guess to your second point, I think it's a really interesting thing to underline, this idea that on your resume, you've got more than just the MBA. You've got this other degree program that I think suggests a sort of broader set of skills and, sort of whether it's language or even just, international, an interest in kind of international business and multiple cultures and things. So I feel like that's a really great thing to highlight.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, what about you? How has Lauder kind of helped you along the path to your career goals and things?
Yeah, definitely. I think echoing what Juliana said about the Lauder career network and as well as the alumni network has been both super helpful. I think to start, Kim Conroy, our career advisor, has been phenomenal. Even before the Wharton program started, she already set up a ton of calls with alumni from different industries to come in and speak to Lauder students. So because of COVID, this was all done virtually, but even for something like tech or a specific company, for example, like Amazon or for Google, instead of going into kind of a info session or a coffee chat with maybe 70 students, you kind of have a really tight knit Lauder community of maybe like 15 students where you can actually ask questions and hear their candid experience. So I think this is all throughout the year. She will constantly connect you with alumni and provide resources there. And I think secondly, speaking on the alumni piece, is that when I was preparing for my Amazon interview and even just learning about the role at Amazon, I spoke to a Lauder grad that did the Pathways program, and he was so helpful in providing, what it is like in day-to-day activities, and also just being very candid on what like the challenges are, what are the good parts about the role. And I think the second piece is that in my first year, I actually wanted to see, well, what else is out there? So I would go through the Lauder database and look at where everybody else is working alumni. So for example, I found someone doing luxury goods in Asia. And I thought, oh, I don't know much about this industry, but let me just talk to someone and hear their experience. And for all the people that I reached out to on LinkedIn or through their personal email, everybody was so friendly and responded really quickly and were willing to connect. So I think that type of what Huli mentioned about like Lauder love, I think it still is very real and exists even for alumni that have graduated, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a great, point to make, and that the Wharton network's fantastic. Like I'm a part of it and I find it to be, really responsive, et cetera. But I definitely have always sensed from everyone that's done Lauder that there is that sort of special tier kind of the community that there's this extra bond that you all have. So that makes sense. Wendy, if you're willing, I'd love to hear a little bit about a typical day for you in the program, because I think it's important for those tuning in to understand that you're having like a regular MBA day, which I think you should walk us through, but then there's some added components because of Lauder. And I just think it'd be really useful for people to understand that. And if you want to stick to like maybe what it's like during the first year or the more kind of routinized aspects of it, that's fine. Because I recognize in year number 2, maybe things are a bit more, just open-ended. But yeah, just love to hear your take on like, what was a typical day like for you when you kind of were, getting going with the program, juggling both MBA and Lauder?
Yeah, I think to start, the reason why the Lauder program can also be completed in 2 years is because all Lauder students take additional courses. So we will end up just taking more credits than the traditional Wharton MBA student.
Right.
So I think what that means is that my course schedule will be a lot more packed. So classes start at 8:30. So I get to campus by like 8:25. I start with my first Wharton class, and then I have my Lauder class following that. And then I will have another Wharton class. And then in the afternoon, I have another Wharton class, but it is actually internationally focused, so it will count as a Lauder degree as well. So I think this is the beauty between Wharton and Lauder, is that there are certain Wharton classes that will double count as Lauder credits as well. So I will have another class there, and then I will finish my day with another Wharton class. So I think my day will typically be I will have 1 or 2 extra credits per semester compared to a traditional Wharton MBA student. But I think from a community aspect is that in these classes, whether it's Lauder focused or international studies related, these tend to be much smaller classes where you can have more intimate discussions with your peers.
Okay, that makes sense. And Juliana, are you willing to do the same? I'm just curious to know, because I know you have the language piece, which maybe makes your schedule a little bit different than Wendy's. But yeah, just be good to know, what is a typical day like for you in the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Wendy did a great job describing that aspect of Wharton Lauder students are taking on a heavier academic course load. So as she mentioned, we would typically take 1 to 2 additional credits. In your first year, it is 2 credits. So one of my credits is my language one, so Portuguese, and then the other one is more a general seminar style type course where the nice thing about that one is that all 80 of us, so currently in my class there's about 80 students, we would all be together for that course. And then I guess something that I would add that a traditional Wharton student doesn't have access to is we have even our own building. There is a lounge area, which unfortunately last year we couldn't take advantage of for COVID reasons, but this year it's been great to just use it as a way to catch up with classmates, meet people from the class of 23, work on projects, and also this idea of we have sometimes speakers, whether it's through Zoom that Lauder organizes, so that further complements our education. And then I think one aspect we haven't talked about is as Lauder students, we also do a master's thesis, and one of them is in a group, so groups of 4. And actually this past October rather, I got the opportunity to travel with my group of 4 to the Ivory Coast. And this is also sponsored by Lauder. So I also think it's like another great opportunity to take advantage of those field-based learning opportunities.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And now you've reminded me of the special lounge and facilities privileges that the Lauder students have. And yeah, obviously the travel, which, seems to be coming back online quite nicely now that we're hopefully in the more latter stages of the pandemic. But yeah, heading off to the Ivory Coast, on your October break is obviously a really great thing to do. And getting that kind of field experience. So I guess, maybe you guys have touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear from each of you. And I guess we'll start with Juliana. What's just something that surprised you about the Wharton Lauder program and community? I mean, you obviously knew quite a bit about it when you signed up and agreed to matriculate and come to the program. But what's like something that just, was maybe unexpected or really surprising?
Yeah, I don't know that it's really unexpected, but I guess it was surprising to a certain degree, which is this idea of the power of the community. Before you join, everybody talks about Lauder love and the community, and it's something that multiple people highlighted to me, but it's one of those things that you're like, okay, yeah, sure, it's a strong community, but then once you join, you're like, wow, okay, it truly is, like, people take this Lauder love really seriously. Kim, who we've mentioned a few times now in our conversation, she goes above and beyond to make sure that even before we've officially started the program, we've already talking with alumni from around the world, from diverse industries, companies, in executive positions. So the fact that we're getting access to these individuals early on to talk to just the Lauder community, I think that's something that really surprised me, which no going in, yes, people had mentioned the community aspect to me, but I didn't really know the level of, or I guess rather how strong it truly is.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Wendy, how about you? What's something that surprised you about the whole Wharton Lauder experience?
Yeah, I think also similarly is the people and the community. I kind of alluded to earlier is that this is really a community where it is very global, it is very international. For example, the Lauder class that I'm taking at 10:15, no one in that class is an American citizen,
Wow.
which is very, very different in any environment that I have been in. And I think for a lot of students, they are coming from different countries, different cultures, whether it's they've worked there, they've lived there, and it's very international. So I think like the diversity of thought has just been incredible. I always knew that Lauder is a very diverse program, but I think really being here, being in class, hearing what my classmates have to say, their experiences has just been absolutely incredible. And I think it really continues to make me want to continue that international and global journey as I progress in my career.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I must say, I think that the entirety of Wharton benefits from the existence of Lauder. Like, I feel like the folks in my classes who were Lauder students always had, that angle to offer that was a bit more international, a bit more open to the rest of the world. And that makes Wharton such a strong program overall in terms of its international strengths and stuff. So definitely interesting to hear you guys underline that. Now, this next question I have is, I think, a lot of the people who listen to the Clear Admit podcast are prospective candidates, right? They're beginning the process or they're applying to business school. And so we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the admissions process. And so, I wondered, I don't know, Wendy, maybe we'll stick with you for this as a starting point, but I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about like what's required. I know there's like an additional essay to write and there's maybe even a separate interview as well, but I'd love to just hear from you, like what did you have to do to apply to Lauder that was in addition, to applying to Wharton? And do you have any advice for that process?
Yeah, I think tactically speaking, you're right. There is this additional essay that you have to write for Lauder in addition to your Wharton essays. And I believe this year and maybe in subsequent years, that one essay is perhaps broken down into 2 or 3 additional questions. Mm-hmm. And secondly is that language is a really big component in the Lauder program. Everyone that applies and joins the Lauder is expected to speak at least one other language in addition to English. So there's the OPI test where you kind of test for that language, whether it means you're, for example, Spanish is your second language and you want to be in the Latin America Spanish track, then you would test for that and see where you place. And it has to be of a certain score to be able to place into that program. Mm-hmm. For example, with the global track and the Africa general track, you have to reach superior, which is equivalent to fluent in a second language to be able to kind of quote unquote test out of that language and be placed in one of those tracks. So there is that language component. And when it comes to the interview process, in addition to the Wharton TBD and the Wharton interview, you also have perhaps a 30 to 45 minute Lauder interview with a Lauder student or a Lauder adcom. So that's an additional process there. And when I think about tactically, like what tips I have, I think I would offer first is, like Huli and I mentioned, there is going to be additional coursework, and of course, like we have the master's theses as well. I think one question an applicant should ask him or herself is, do I really want to take on this additional coursework? Is that going to be helpful for me in my career and my MBA journey? And for a lot of people, that the answer could be no, and I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. But just recognizing that there is that additional course load involved. And I think secondly, in terms of application, is being very tactical about what parts of the Lauder program or what resources the program can offer to help you progress in your career and how you can contribute to the community as well. So that means looking at, Juliana mentioned like our classes and as well as the LIV. So like this year we had Iceland and Alaska so far, but it's like how can these specific experiences help shape who you are and help you in your professional career? And I think secondly is what experiences in your personal professional life can you bring to the Lauder community overall and as well as the track that you're applying to. So I think to summarize is one, understanding, do you want to take on that additional course load? And number two is what specifically can Lauder help you achieve?
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like, there's a ton of really good advice in terms of like understanding the mechanics of the admissions process for Lauder, but even some of the, like you say, the tactics of like knowing what you're getting into and how you're going to utilize what Lauder can give you, and also what you're going to bring to the process as well. But Juliana, how about you? What advice do you have? Like if you meet an MBA applicant today who says, I'm thinking about Lauder. What's it all entail and how can I do well and ensure that I, have a chance of getting in? What would you tell them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is, and Wendy was saying this, is making sure that I would ask that person that they have a clear goal in mind, because it is more work. And so there has to be a reason why you want to undertake this additional degree, and it could be just from the community aspect of I want to be part of a smaller community within a 900 person class, right? The Wharton class is pretty large, and so this idea of having a smaller home of just 80 people that could be from different parts around the world, and you're just curious about that, I think that's great, right? It doesn't even have to be purely professional. And then once that goal is solidified, my advice more tactically for being a strong candidate within the applicant pool is take the time to really know the people and the community, building those relationships. For example, before COVID in December, I visited campus and got to participate in Lauder's holiday party. And so I got to meet with some of the staff, professors, and students, and thought that was just a great way of truly seeing if I could picture myself here. And then after that, I also made sure to stay in touch with the people that I had met, ask them for advice. Some people were really extraordinary and took the time to review my resume, to review my essay. And I thought that was, again, truly helped me because of the emphasis and the importance that Lauder truly places in community. Like if you're showing the application committee that you're taking the time to truly immerse yourself in the community and getting to know the people, that's the type of students that they want at Lauder. So I think that would be my number one piece of advice.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I want to give you guys a kind of, a question that's not necessarily about Lauder, but, since neither of you, at least to my understanding, are from Philadelphia, it sounds like Canada and Colombia,
Mm-hmm.
so not Philadelphia. I just want to know, I think a lot of candidates coming to Wharton are not from Philadelphia. In fact, 99% of them. I think most people don't even know much about Philadelphia. And so, Juliana, tell me one thing that you like about Philadelphia, or maybe you don't like it, or, I just like to know, like, what's been your impression of Philadelphia? Because I think that's a big question mark for people. They don't know the city that well, or they maybe have seen like Rocky or something. They don't know much about the real life in Philly. So what do you think about Philly?
I think the one thing I'll mention is the food scene. There is a multitude of truly exquisite restaurants. I heard somebody say that apparently a lot of the big restaurants try it out in Philly first before going off to New York. And the nice thing about that is you can get some pretty delicious meals from different cuisines from around the world at prices that are more affordable than it would be in a city like New York. So I've truly enjoyed exploring the food scene here in Philly.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great tidbit. I'm from Philly originally, so I could not agree more. Great restaurants. Wendy, what about you? What do you think of Philadelphia?
Yeah, I actually really love Philadelphia. I think it has the combination of being a big city, but also small enough where, for example, when we're walking around Rittenhouse Square, walking the city, I will always run into my Wharton classmates or Lauder classmates. So I think it's like small enough where it builds a community, but still large enough where there are a lot of things, for example, like bars in the evenings, or like diverse food, a lot of like activities out there as well. So I think it's like the combination of that allows it to be like affordable, but you can still get everything you want in a city.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I will say, one of the things I thought was really interesting about being at Wharton was just the idea that you could discover a new city, for at least the lion's share of the class not being from there, with your classmates. So it wasn't like a city where, everyone already knew a bunch of people in that city and had their own kind of maybe pre-established social network. So you're kind of, with all of your classmates discovering this new place. And I always thought that was like a really nice thing. And because I was from there, I was able to kind of show people around a bit and stuff. But yeah, really appreciate you guys weighing in on that. So I think we're kind of out of time, but I wanted to thank you both for, all of the insights that you shared today about Wharton and Lauder. I know that you're probably juggling a ton of stuff between your, extra classes and, everything that goes on in the MBA program too. So I really do appreciate you guys making the time to talk today. So yeah, thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Juliana. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grant. Thank you so much for having us.
So everyone, that'll do it for this episode of the Clear Admit podcast. Thanks for listening. And please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen.